Hello and welcome to the Animus podcast, a weekly podcast focusing on all the Assassin's Creed stuff you want to know. This week, soundtracks, which is awesome. I'm McCrackenway. You probably know me as Connor because everyone seems to. And I'm one of your hosts along with my good friends Ares here.
Hello.
And Aftermath.
G'day.
This week we are joined by an old face and a new face, or for you guys, just a voice. We've got Matt.
Hey, guys.
And Dan.
Hey, guys.
From the Dan and Matt Network. So, a couple of quick things before we get started. We are currently throwing around some new ideas for the podcast. One of the things is Aries and I getting a bit more into the hosting part. So, those of you who think that's a good idea, definitely say so. Further things. It's going to take a somber moment just because of the timing of the recording. Hearts go out to Paris right now. Bad things are happening there, and it's very sad. I won't get too far into it. If you want to take a moment of silence, I encourage you to pause the podcast right now and then continue listening later. Let's see. Any other business to cover before we start? There was a comic released. We're not going to talk about it this time. Maybe some other time. Do either of you guys have anything else?
They're filming the new movie in London. That's a thing.
That's true, yeah.
Fallout 4 released this week, so
Yes,
I'm playing that.
I'm also playing that.
Which is enjoying it very much so far. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point, maybe related into the open world discussion in a further episode.
Normally we would do an interview here. We've already interviewed Matt. We've never interviewed Dan. Do we want to interview Dan?
Ooh.
Dan, would you like to be interviewed?
Oh, you guys are asking yourselves. Sure, I don't see why not.
All right, so we'll just run down the four basic questions, starting with, how did you get into Assassin's Creed?
Well, when Assassin's Creed first came out in 2007, I was in college, and a friend of mine had 360, and he allowed me to play it every once in a while. And he had Assassin's Creed, and I was playing it, and I was like, wow, this is really different. This is really unique. And I really got into it. I wound up beating the game on his console in, I don't know, like 3 weeks. And it was so crazy because it was like, should I study or should I play my game? I'm gonna play the game. So that's how I got into it, and it's been a huge part of my gaming experience ever since.
Very interesting. So, next question is, how did you, I guess, we have it listed, how did you get into the online community? For you, it's how did you get the idea for this channel and these videos you guys do?
Well, that was really, a lot of that was Matt, because he always wanted to do a podcast, and then he was thinking, like, why don't we just start like a YouTube channel on a lot of things Assassin's Creed. So I said to myself, yeah, why not? You know, I got nothing else to do in my spare time. So we decided to do a bunch of videos, like unboxings, maybe throw in a little gameplay, and it's kind of what we've been doing since last year. Last year, yeah.
Yeah, I quite enjoy your channel.
Thank you.
So, this is an interesting question that came out of a thread a long time ago, and it's basically, how has Assassin's Creed changed you, your life, / what has Assassin's Creed done for you? It came off this thread that was like this really deep story about how it saved a person's life, and I don't expect that, but
it saved my life.
All right, go on.
I gotta say it changed my gaming experience for the better, obviously, because I was so used to just basic games like shoot 'em up games and different things like that, and it's kind of like really got me into the whole history of, what's going on. Like the history of like the Templars and everything like that. And it was just something to really, something so unique and something so different that it really just changed my whole perspective on what gaming could be about. Like with Assassin's Creed, the original, and going back to like the 12th century, and then obviously Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, going back to the Renaissance era in Italy. It was really just very. Again, I keep going back to unique because that's exactly what it was, and I learned how to curse a little bit in Italian. So
Nice.
Yeah, as did we all. And then Aries here went off and was like, I can learn about more than just cursing. So, last question.
Sure.
Probably one that comes up a lot, which is, what is your favorite Assassin's Creed game?
It's got to be Assassin's Creed 2. Because that was just a total game changer. I mean, I loved the original Assassin's Creed, and when the second one came out with the beautiful music, gorgeous setting in the Renaissance era, I really connected with Ezio. It was just a complete game changer. I couldn't have been more happy with that game, and it was just. It's really indescribable because it's one of the greatest games I have ever played. Definitely top 3, if not number 1.
Good answer.
Yeah.
And now, speaking of beautiful music, gonna move on to the main attraction of the episode, which is Syndicate soundtrack. So just before we get very far into it, what are your guys' thoughts on the soundtrack? I mean, we've got a smaller chamber ensemble, probably between 7 and 10 people compared to a massive orchestra that you have in a lot of video game scores.
Yeah.
Right.
First of all, I think it's the best soundtrack since 2. And
I agree.
I loved like the little use of like the strings, like the violin, like it just fit the time period so well. And the ambient music is just like I find the reason why I'm taking so long with this game is I'm just standing on top of a building listening to this. Like it's just so good.
Yeah, I agree. It's exactly like how Matt described. It's just it's beautiful and it's very somber and
also really cheeky at points.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the point about it being a very good period piece. I think with AC2 for sure, you can kind of tell. Excuse me. You can tell if there's a lot of Italian influence going on there.
Yeah.
With Brotherhood and Revelations, it's still sort of the same way, but not quite as much. Yeah. With AC3, it's kind of like, it could be America, I guess. AC4 is pretty much like, pirates.
Yeah.
Unity is like vague Baroque, but you can't really tell where. But Syndicate is so distinctly Victorian London, it couldn't possibly be anything else.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a theme of the episode will be Austin Wintory is a mad genius. So very good job in getting a very unique and specific sound that even through different types of music, soft, ambient, loud, and active, that it all fits with this distinct Victorian vibe so well.
Yeah, I think they really hit the nail on the head with this.
Yeah. So, Austin Wintory, I'd like to talk a little bit. He did an interview for Game Informer in their magazine this month. And he gives some pretty interesting insight into the score, which is, let's see. One of the things he talked about a lot is what he calls diegetic music.
Yep.
Which is music coming from the world itself, essentially. He cites Black Flags, sea shanties, and tavern songs as an example. Interestingly, that goes a lot into the music in his score as well. Just there's a lot of style from the era. I mean, he talks about Ubisoft hired a musicologist who did all of this research on songs that absolutely would have been heard on the time and in the style. So there's a lot of things like that go into his music. He quotes a couple very English songs in his music. And that's the main AC thing. He actually talks about, for those who don't know, he also did Journey. He apparently helped on the score for The Order 1886 as well.
Okay.
So he talks a lot about just music in the games industry, and there's an interesting question about indie versus blockbuster games, and working on Journey, obviously a lot of people would consider that an indie game, but like indie developers, like say the developers of, Journey is like, and that game company is sponsored by Sony a lot, so a lot of indie developers would not consider that indie. So it's kind of an interesting, it's an interesting thing he brings up of different perspectives in the industry. But we'll go back to this idea of diegetic music, which Syndicate has a lot of, and it's really cool. From bands playing from gazebos in parks to choirs, a bunch of tavern songs, even outside of the murder ballads. How have you felt about that while playing the game?
Well, I have to say, like, as far as the ballads go, and like, did you say the murder songs too?
Yeah, murder ballads.
Well, they come as you progress in the game, and since I've only gotten to sequence 5, I've heard a few, and like I said, I can't name them right now, but it was kind of not like funny, but it was interesting how back then, like, the news was sung, and it was interesting to me because as I'm like murdering these people, then people sing about it. So that was entertaining to me, but also it was like, wow, people, that actually happened back then.
Yeah, it was kind of, how do you say, interesting. Just a little like,
yeah,
hey, this is what they do. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about this music that comes from the world is that, I mean, we've talked in a couple episodes previously, and I mean, I've brought this up a lot, of how Syndicate having moving parts in its world, like vehicles, makes the city feel more alive. And I think that carries on into the music.
Absolutely.
It's like the only music in the game isn't just, the stuff that nobody, none of the characters are hearing the music that you're hearing in the cutscene. But you walk through the park, and suddenly it's like, there is music in this world. It is actually alive.
Yeah, the first time I was in a train station and I heard some faint sound coming from below me, dropped down a couple levels and heard this group of like 6 or 7 people singing Rule Britannia. I was like, oh, holy crap, that's awesome. And I just stood there for a couple minutes listening to them until I accidentally killed a guy and they all ran away. But until that point, it was quite fun.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, how did you accidentally kill a guy?
It was like, I think there was like a crowd event that showed up or something, or maybe there was some dude who was patrolling, and I can't, it was like one of the first days I was playing it, but I managed to mess it up somehow.
Well, I noticed that when, like, I would go, because I'm looking for those beer bottles, so I would walk into a bar, and there's just some lady singing with a guy on a piano, and you just stand there and listen, and it's really pretty, and it's...
You got a good game when you could just sit there and not do anything and just listen to the music.
Yeah.
And you can really just appreciate the effort and quality that they put into the game.
Yeah, that's one of my marks of a great game, is a game that you really want to walk through.
Exactly.
It's running everywhere. And Syndicate definitely qualifies for that, although, granted, I haven't been able to take it as slow as I'd like, given having to finish it for the podcast. But my second playthrough definitely be able to take all the time in the world. So
yeah, I'm going through a little bit of Animus Island withdrawal because I'm trying not to spoil anything for myself. So I haven't been keeping up, but...
We'll do a 1 week backward plug. The only episode so far that has spoilers is last week's spoiler cast. So if you have finished the game, want to spoil it, check last week's. Pass backwards from that, you're still good, even up to the release of the game.
Also,
Nice.
Okay.
So, I guess we'll move on to the actual soundtrack, the thing that you can put on your iPod or your computer and actually listen to.
Yeah.
So I've split this into a couple major categories, some of which we'll breeze through because going too in depth would be very spoilery. But we'll just start with the major themes of the game. We've got two in this, one at the very beginning of the listed soundtrack and one at the end, and they're called Bloodlines, and the other is called Family.
Yep.
Okay.
So Bloodlines is really the one that carries the main theme of the game and the fries in London. And you'll hear a lot of it show up throughout several songs in the game. But it's this slow, primarily piano tune. Until, I think it's one of the ones that we heard that was released before the game came out.
it was, yeah. It was one of that group of like 3 or 4 songs.
And then eventually this lilting violin comes in. It's such a beautiful song. Like we've had AC3, AC4, Rogue, Unity. Ever since really AC3, we've had this bit, like every theme is big and energetic.
Yeah.
And this is the first to have a bit more of a somber tone, which I think is really interesting. Given that the game as a whole, I think, is one of the lighter entries of the series.
Yeah. It's a weird like juxtaposition with the whole somber tone of the music and light characters.
Well, I'm listening to it right now, actually, as you're talking about it. And Connor, when you said, and then the violin comes in, the violin came in. And by the second part, it does get a little bit livelier. But, Matt, like you said, there is kind of a weird thing with Syndicate being very lively, but the song being a bit quiet. There is a progression there.
It's still kind of dark.
It does feel very somber, which, again, hits the tone right on the head.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the other one, Family, is you might be able to tell by the title that it is the one song that links this soundtrack to past Assassin's Creed soundtracks.
Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, fun fact, sung by Victoria Atkin, Evie Fry herself.
No way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep. When I was digging through the comments on the You Be Loud soundtrack on YouTube before I bought the thing a couple days ago, or yesterday, there was one comment by Austin Wintory who was like, shout out to Evie Fry for singing, the vocals for this song. Another lady whose name I've forgotten did all the other songs, but Victoria actually did this one, so that's really cool, and she's a damn good singer.
Yeah. So, for those who haven't caught on yet, it directly quotes Ezio's family in the vocals. And I don't know, it has what I feel is a bit more of a haunting quality to it compared to Ezio's family from the last couple times we've heard it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which, again, the themes in this game are surprisingly...
Eerie.
Yeah, and sad, almost.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But the way they bring it back is like, because that song plays right when you start the game. Like when they're riding into London on the train.
Oh, good. I was wondering what that was, and I didn't want to replay that sequence to find out.
Yeah. But as soon as I heard it, it was like, okay, I know exactly where I am. I'm playing Assassin's Creed. This is fantastic.
Yeah. And I think, there's been some discussion on the subreddit a couple times, and I've actually at different points of time taken both sides of this issue, whether you want a soundtrack that is familiar and links it to all the games, or whether you want a new, a soundtrack with its own identity for a game with its own identity. And I think what Family achieves is giving you that familiar feeling right at the beginning of the game to be like, okay, this is Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed, as far as I'm concerned as well, is back at this point. It's like, yeah Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
Back, yes. Back in the groove. And then I think it's the rest of the soundtrack that really gives you that fresh feeling as well.
Yeah. And as far as like, just to bring up a similarity, back when the first Superman came out, Superman had a theme song, and it carried over into his other movies, and that's kind of how it is now. Even though the soundtrack isn't littered with that theme, but it's just nice to hear it come back because it's like, okay, it's Assassin's Creed.
It's a huge part of the game. It's always been the game and the soundtrack. And that's why I always felt such a strong connection to AC2, Brotherhood, Revelations, because it was always such a beautiful soundtrack. Jesper Kyd, just a wonderful composer, and it was to the point where me and Matt were just like listening to it in a car, and just it was just beautiful, and we were able to just like
sit back and talk about life.
Exactly. It's just like, okay, so it's just a beautiful soundtrack, and I'm glad that we were able to come back with it in Syndicate.
And I think if we look at Ezio's Family, not just as the theme song for Ezio and his trilogy, but sort of as the theme for Assassin's Creed as a whole, which I don't think is too much of a stretch. Yeah. The way that it's incorporated into the Syndicate soundtrack very much parallels the way that Syndicate as a game works. So you have distinct elements of AC2 cropping up and referenced specifically in certain places, but while it takes those elements, it puts a different spin on them, and the tone is very distinct, and then it goes off and does its own entire thing, and I would say the rest of the soundtrack, while feeling very different from anything else that's come before, is still distinctly and unmistakably Assassin's Creed, which is a perfect balance, but again, the soundtrack paralleling the game. Austin Wintory, damn well, good job.
Yeah, seriously, the best since Jesper Kyd.
Yeah. I think one thing you could say, I mean, this is like in my head a way to think about Ezio's Family as being an overarching theme rather than just Ezio's themes. If you think about it, a lot of the themes in the games have been, I mean, especially in the Ezio trilogy and many of the games since then have been this idea that the assassin order is a family. I mean, Brotherhood is, Brotherhood. We're a team,
Yes.
And I mean, Assassin's Creed 2, you could say Ezio's family is obviously, his family that was killed at the beginning of the game, but you could also extend it to all the people he meets along his journey and come in at the end of the game to help him again. So it's really like the Brotherhood is the family, and this is like continuing on the theme of this family, but it goes more overt in that family is not just the Brotherhood, but family is family, which is a major theme in this game. Before we move away from that, when you brought up Superman, I thought of another interesting example, which is that when James Bond went on hiatus, it came back with Casino Royale. Casino Royale, every James Bond movie opens with the James Bond theme and the gun intro thing. In Casino Royale, like, there are lots of moments where, Bond is infiltrating and starting to be badass. You're expecting to hear the James Bond theme, but they don't give it to you. They hold it off. And then it's not until the very end where you hear it again, you're like, James Bond is back. Cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I feel like that kind of applies in a broader sense to this game being back.
Yeah. And I don't think it matters that each game doesn't have its own specific like Assassin's Creed sound, like what that game is recognized for. Mm-hmm. Like, it's awesome that they're connected to the soundtracks like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the next major topic we have is ambient music, which is just what you're going to hear while exploring the world. I think it plays when you're on rooftops, and specifically. I don't think it plays when you're on the ground.
And McCrackenway and I did some experimenting yesterday with trying to figure out where ambient music triggers, and you have to be on the rooftops for a good minute or so before anything happens.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up, because Matt had an interesting, very nice capture on his console, and it's just him standing up on excuse me, it's just him standing up on one of the rooftops, like looking over the beautiful city of London. And they had that ambient music playing, and he just like kind of circles around like a good director would, like in a movie, just looking around. And it really, like, it was just a really beautiful moment, and
yeah, it makes you like sit and think, and it's a calm moment in the game. You don't really have to be doing anything.
absolutely.
You just enjoy, like sit back and enjoy almost.
So the really interesting thing about these is that they all. It's really interesting because you think about it. We talked about this kind of on the last big soundtrack episode we did when you were last on, Matt.
Yep.
And actually, Aries here brought it up, is that in especially Brotherhood soundtrack, there are Latin vocals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which, as someone who doesn't speak Latin, it's just vocal music. It's just music. I don't know. It feels like it's just music.
Right.
Some ancient Roman shit. Who cares?
Yeah. It could be faux Latin for all I care. It's just there to sound cool.
It's just beautiful, and that's
yeah, and it's interesting in this game because all this ambient music has significant portion. Each song is a significant portion in English.
right.
Basically, like the title of each song is what you're going to hear in English in the song.
Yeah. And they're almost all references to bits from Purcell's Dido and Aeneas.
Yeah.
More on that in a bit, but they all kind of have a theme. And one of the things about the Syndicate soundtrack is just by looking at the titles of the songs, you can tell if it is an upbeat song, a murder ballad, or one of the softer ambient tunes, which is very unique as far as soundtracks go.
They're all very clearly marked. Like all of the most of the later category of mission/action music that I have denoted is they're all like a type of song or something musical, like Danza alla Daggers, Waltzing on Rooftops and Cobblestones, The Assassin Two-Step, Gauntlet Scherzo, Bloody Presto con Brio. I think that's a pretty cool way to. These are just titles, obviously, but I think it's a cool way to do them.
Right.
So so these are all specifically tied to certain boroughs. Like the City of London has one song that appears in the City of London when you're on the rooftops. There's one in the Strand. The Strand ended up being my favorite district, and I wasn't quite sure why. I think it's partially the landmarks, but I also think that the song that goes with it, Great Minds Against Themselves Conspire, is probably my favorite. It's got, they all are sort of quiet and somber, but Great Minds Against Themselves Conspire moves into this string part about a quarter of the way in that gives it a little bit of energy.
Right.
Like the feel of industrial London, like stuff is happening.
Progress.
Progress is always being made. And I think a lot of there's quite a few missions to do with your famous character missions. I think several of them take place in the Strand, and it feels to me like it's the cultural center of London, I guess. Like that's where the National Gallery is. And a music hall. I just think it's a really good theme for this place that feels like it's a hubbub. And it's in the title in the song. It's Great Minds Against Themselves Conspire. So it's that's kind of going into the tragedy part of Dido and Aeneas, but it's the Great Minds part that gets into like, here's Victorian London. There's a bunch of great minds here, all doing things and sometimes warring with each other, as several characters in the game do. But
right.
Do you guys have anything that stood out to you about this particular category of music?
I really liked Peace and Iron Strangers Grown from City of London. Specifically, just the first 20 seconds of it, I think is part of my favorite music in the soundtrack, but also it kind of goes up against my other favorite song, the first 20 seconds of Tour of Venice. I yesterday actually, McCrackling and I were playing Syndicate, and I misinterpreted it as family because there is part of it that does actually. There's like a 7-note melody, and the first 5 notes are out of
they're close.
Ezio's family. They're close, not the same thing.
It's like I think in one spot it's like it descends where Ezio's family ascends.
That part is the same, and then it goes on.
Yeah, but instead of actually no, it's instead of ascending for that 4th note, it goes down and then comes back up in Peace and I Are Strangers Grown. But that's, I mean.
So it is different, but it's similar. And the point is a nice little insert, intentional or not, that, again, gets you kind of thinking back to the other games, despite very much being its own thing.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a really – I also like it a lot, and I think it's got a huge advantage as well in that it plays – I feel like every time I'm on the top of St. Paul's, it plays this song.
Yeah.
And the view from St. Paul's is just – the best view for this song. Like it's the majesty of London, and like this story and these characters. It feels like if I had to choose a theme apart from the main theme that kind of embodies how I feel about the story of the game and the characters in the game, it's this one. Partially because Peace and I Are Strangers Grown, so it's like that actually almost kind of applies back to Ezio, who lost peace early on in his life and took like 60 years to find it again.
Yeah.
Yep. McCracken, do we ever figure out which song plays when you get to some of the high viewpoints? Because there is a specific tune that does play at the viewpoints that's different from. Is it this one?
Okay. I did not figure it out. It's not this one. I don't think it's on the released soundtrack, sadly.
Okay. There were a couple of those, yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple songs still that I've looked through and I haven't determined where they show up in the game. So it could be one of those, but I don't think so because I think there's a couple other songs in the game that don't show up on the soundtrack, which always makes me sad.
Yeah.
I want the complete soundtrack for everything. All the time.
Yeah, because they're so good. Like when you're like the whole being on a rooftop versus being on a viewpoint, it's like there's ambient music and there's it's really nice being on rooftops, but when you're on a viewpoint and that one specific song kicks in, it's like magic.
Yeah, and man, I just really like the idea in this game that each borough has its own musical character. You know, because City of London has Peace and I Are Strangers Grown. It's the financial district. I don't know how that necessarily relates to it being the financial district, but that's what it is. There's a cool one, actually. Song's called Too Dreadful, a practice for this open air. It plays in Westminster, and
it's very Westminstery.
Yes,
Westminstery.
Because
Listening to it now.
Starts, the beginning of it quotes directly from a very famous British hymn. They sing it at football games and stuff. It's called Abide With Me. So it's the most British of British songs, almost, apart from, I don't know, that's probably debatable, like, you know, Rule Britannia or, you know, the national anthem of Britain could also be a candidate for that. But everything in Westminster has this theme of Abide With Me shows up a lot in Westminster, whether it's you're climbing a viewpoint and it shows up, or you can actually hear it being sung by a choir in some of the parks. And I think that's really interesting about Westminster because it's, you know, the center of British government, and it's got all these parks, and it's really where you hear, I feel, the most British-oriented music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really where it's like, here's the nation, British music. Wow.
We must be in Britain.
Yeah. That must be Buckingham. You know, I wasn't sure, but this music makes me think that's Buckingham Palace over there.
Should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
So yeah. Any more thoughts on the ambient music before we move on?
It's good.
It's
Yes.
very good, and some of it is creepy, like Brotherhood, which I like.
Yes, I do like that. I think we did talk about that on the last episode, didn't we? Just sometimes, especially because I feel like there's a large comparison to be made between the general concept of this game and Brotherhood, where you're liberating this oppressed city.
There is a great one of Evie's notebook journal thingies that addresses exactly that. I won't go into details, but go through Evie's notebook. It's really great.
I mean, even though, like, neither of these cities at the time periods we see them are that oppressed, but it's a cool feeling because, like, in this fiction, it's like these are secretly oppressed cities, and the hostile feeling in the music really sells that, and I like that a lot. Even though, for me, you're never going to make me feel that uncomfortable in London, because London is my second home, and I'm going to be there again this year, so I'm happy.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Really? I'm jealous.
I'm actually going to 2 different nations that are not the U.S. this holiday season.
That's awesome.
Cool. Where are you going?
Well, I'm going to Britain, starting in London, going to see my my relatives for actual Christmas, and then as soon as the year turns, we're going to Jerusalem.
Wow.
Yeah, because my parents, who I obviously want to see for Christmas, are both on sabbatical from their university positions.
Okay.
So they're currently on my mom's sabbatical, but she's a British citizen, so she can't stay in the country for more than 6 months. Otherwise, she has to start paying taxes. So
I see.
we're leaving on the 1st to go to Dad's sabbatical in Jerusalem. So
Nice.
Wow.
You're giving Loomer a run for his money.
Yeah, right?
I've always been. My family's always traveled. I've just not been to. I've been to Venice. I've been to Rome. I've not been to Florence. So that's still
Single tear rolls down Aries' cheek.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd actually want to go to Constantinople before I go to Florence. Personally,
Paris.
I mean, I've been to Paris as well.
That was back when I was like 13.
Yeah.
When I go to Constantinople, you're about 100 years too late, mate.
Well, Istanbul, Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. That was a song, by the way. Anyway, so, yeah. That was a good point, Matt. I forgot what it was. On to... okay, so this next section, we'll probably have to do a little bit of tiptoeing.
Yes.
All right.
Let's tiptoe.
Yeah, so you're at the beginning of sequence 4.
No, I just finished
Beginning of sequence 5.
Yeah, sequence 5.
Yeah, okay, so you've just murdered a doctor in the face.
That was so cool.
Cadavers don't have boots.
Yeah, right?
That's pretty
Oh
great.
my god.
So there are 4 songs that we can definitely talk about spoiler free. 5 songs, because 3 of them I don't know exactly where they show up. One of them. Okay, so we'll start right at the beginning. Got London is Waiting plays right when you walk into London with Jacob and Evie as they step out of the train station. I believe. I have not gone back and checked.
Probably.
But I've got to take a second to listen to a little bit of it to remind myself what it is.
And that theme crops up right at the beginning.
Oh yeah. Also
Right
bells.
The bells, yeah.
Because that's another thing about just the sound of being, especially in London, because there's a very familiar tune of the bells that comes from London, which is the Westminster Bells chime, you know? Da 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 dum da 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 dum.
Yeah.
So we're now there, so I think it's cool that opens with bells. And then it kicks, the song, gets you that Assassin's Creed Syndicate theme, and then you kick into this more energetic...
Is that when the kid takes your money?
Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned that, I think almost every Assassin's Creed protagonist has his money stolen at some point.
Yep.
They need to, they're these
Except
stealth
Altair, because
assassins.
that wasn't invented yet.
Yeah, money did not exist. No, I mean, it obviously existed. I'll tell you, I was having none of it, though. Probably the smart thing, materialism.
Yeah.
He put it all on his card.
I mean, if we're being honest, money and capitalism is what puts London in this state in the game in the first place. There's a very capitalism is bad overtone to this game, which, agree with or disagree with, whatever. It's an interesting theme.
Well, if I can inject some history into this for a second,
Yes.
Part of it is that this is London, after the Industrial Revolution's over, and it's just like at the height of its producing
It is
powers.
kind of
So
being
Smith
capitalist.
was like, capitalism, sweet, division of labor, let's just make all the stuff we can. At the beginning, when it was this new and exciting thing, the equivalent of which is like, hey, the internet's so cool we can communicate instantly, isn't this fantastic? And then Marx comes along, who you run into in the game, and he's writing like 1849 or so is when he writes the Communist Manifesto. He's like, hey, yeah, we're producing stuff, but it's taking a toll on people, and this is bad.
Yeah.
The equivalent is like, our Big Brother horrors for the future of the internet. We're always being watched. We can't do anything. So it's very much there's this, wonderful, brave new world feeling at the beginning, which then kind of becomes corrupted over time. We can argue by the influence of the Templars if we want to give an in-universe explanation.
Yeah.
But I think it's positioning London specifically at the point where it's simultaneously at its height and at its trough at the very bottom. So you have these very opposed worlds going on between Whitechapel where you show up and then Westminster where you end up, and part of it is kind of that the whole it's good but it's bad.
Yeah, I think they're really
Interesting way to put it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think they're really trying to sell that with, some of the most downtrodden people in the Industrial Revolution were children because there's no child labor laws, and they're now working with all these dangerous machines. Lots of them die before they hit 11. Victorian London is Victorian England, the Victorian era is just a bad time to be in the workforce. It's really
It's
awful.
a bloody marvelous time to be alive.
It's a bloody awful time to be alive. It is the worst. Victorian London, my personal favorite time period of the ones that I know anything about. So, yes, I would go there in time machine. No, I would not like to live there, unless I was very wealthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think London is Waiting does a really good job of introducing London and its feel. Starting with, I don't know, because it's also, I feel like it juxtaposes the Twins theme, who have just arrived in London. They don't know anything about it, with, which is probably why Jacob gets his money stolen. But I think it's a good introduction to London while at the same time being sort of, while keeping London sort of an unknown, I guess.
I think good point about it being an introduction to London, because like as soon as you step off the train, you get your money stolen. So it establishes that people are kind of fighting to survive here.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So yeah, there's that song. The dance begins. I don't have much to say about because I have absolutely no idea where that takes place.
None at all.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't like the soundtrack. I don't think is necessarily ordered in the way that the songs show up in the game.
It's mostly ordered, but there's
Yeah.
some standouts.
Yeah. And I know that I've definitely encountered video game soundtracks in the past that have done that. Like Mass Effect 2 had the soundtracks, like the soundtrack had songs all over the place. So like that does not take place there, nor does that take place there, blah, blah. I think I did, at some point I created a playlist. It was like, this is the order in which this stuff happens. Kind of thing.
Damn it.
And then went on to shuffle it all the time. But, so yeah, that's one thing. Let's see. A song you've definitely heard, and I can tell you exactly where it plays, is Soothing Syrup.
Yes.
And that plays during the assassination of Dr. John Elliotson.
Which is my favorite by far right now.
Yeah, of the 3, I guess you played.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think the Asylum's really cool. And I love this theme. It has plucked strings right at the beginning, and it goes into this flute melody. Kind of, it's like, it's a very good sneaking around theme, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely.
I want to get a little further in it in my own listening, because there is a wonderful clarinet solo in this song, and I'm a clarinetist, so I really like the fact that exists. Austin Wintory, if you're listening, you should put out sheet music for this, or if you can, I guess. You know what? I'll just
back alley sheet music dealing.
Yeah.
Got the notes? Yeah, I got the notes.
That's actually a joke that like my band director in high school always used to make when people lost their music. She'd be like, "There's some guy, you know, on the corner of Grand and Ivinson, just like with a trench coat, being like, hey, you want a part for a sleigh ride? You want a third trumpet part?" But yeah, I love this. I love this song a lot. It really works for sneaking around in this darkened asylum, and it's kind of at this. It's at this kind of crossroads between being beautiful and being scary.
Yeah.
Which parallels the whole Elliotson thing perfectly, because it's like, hey, look, science, cool, but also I just took this man's brain out.
I mean, we talked a bit about that. Elliotson is an interesting character because he's one of the three historical characters who exist as Templars. He's a phrenologist who is, I mean, science at this time is in a weird place where it's like there's so much learning going on, but especially in the fields of like anatomy, people don't want to leave you their bodies or anything because I mean, we talked a lot about this last time, you know, body snatchers and everything. So Elliotson is a phrenologist, so he's currently participating in this, what we now know as a quack science, where it's like basically you think that the shape of the brain influences your personality and your behavior. That's how you open on him. That's when you first see him, is he's performing phrenology on an unfortunate, probably convict patient. I don't know how he got his cadavers.
Probably.
But it's kind of a rough scene to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like that this song, because this song starts playing right after that. Right when you get off of the vantage point and it's like, okay, it starts actually playing when it's showing you the options you have for the assassination. So it picks up right after this awful scene, and I think successfully manages to keep the eeriness of the place, because it's an asylum, and be fun to listen to at the same time. Like, I don't listen to many soundtracks for anything that's horror oriented, because horror soundtracks are always essentially the same and not very interesting.
Bim bum bum.
Yeah, there's always like some part where there's just a shriek and there's tinkly, not quite music at some point. It's just,
oh my god, another violin sting.
Yeah,
shock,
like,
horror.
Whoa. So I think this is good because I mean, a lot of horror in games comes from just building atmosphere. Jump scares don't really work, period, I think, as being just scaring you, making you feel afraid, because you get jumped and then you're like, oh, that was stupid. So I think I like that this kind of keeps that creepy undertone.
Yeah, that apprehension, absolutely.
I like that it's creepy that doesn't have to deal with the first civilization.
Yeah, that's true.
That's new, yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I'm trying to think about other songs we can talk about. Okay, so the other two songs that I've listed, I mean, we can go off the idea of eerie, because there's a song called Cathedrals of Steel, and I don't know where that comes in, but it's very eerie. And there's a song called
I think it's about train stations.
Is it?
I would imagine, because they're all, made of steel.
Yeah,
the cathedrals are still, stone and whatnot. And the point I made, I think, last week was that train stations are the new churches. They're the giant things that everyone goes to do, I guess, get around town. But I think Cathedrals of Steel, is about train stations.
Yeah, I guess the way it starts, you could imagine looking up at this massive structure, maybe in the fog. Because it is sort of, I mean, it starts it starts pretty eerie. It's got these dissonant harmonies in the voices.
It sounds like church choir-y.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I don't know that much else about it at this moment.
Yeah.
I've also got a song that's spoiler free because I don't know where it is. Is The Churning Seas of London, which sounds like it should be about the Thames, but I think it's also a line that is said at some point, and I don't remember where the line comes in.
Yep.
But it's another one. It sounds like it should be... It's also kind of that quiet, slightly eerie sound. It's got plucked strings. I mean, I could just list all the instrumentation through all the songs, but that would be boring. So that's one. If you have any thoughts on, great. Otherwise, I have no more thoughts on it. Sad.
Yeah, it's just kind of there. It's nice and quiet. That's going on my reading playlist, which, for those of you who ever read, just take a bunch of the songs from the Assassin's Creed series over time and get all the nice little ambient ones and put them into a playlist while you read. It is fantastic.
Reading.
Wait, Ares, I thought you couldn't read.
Wait, no, run away.
Evacuate. No.
They found me out. My elaborate ruse has been shattered.
I'm illiterate.
Okay, let's see. I'll briefly try to talk about some of these other songs without saying too much. There's two songs that play during memory corridors, and they are pretty good at conveying that slightly eerie feeling that you always have in memory corridors, and also that slightly, because it's a consequence or thing of the Animus, that these blank white spaces. It's got a little bit of that sci-fi-ness about it.
Yeah. There was always like this, again, I have to use the word eerie, but anything that has to do with the Animus kind of feels like a Ghost in the Machine kind of thing.
Yeah, especially when they had so much emphasis on the bleeding effect in past games.
Yeah.
So it was like, this is bad for you.
You might not want to keep doing this.
This is not good.
But yeah, so those songs I'll just say what they're called. It's You've Stolen Your Last Shilling and Take Your Bow, Knave are the ones that I know. They accomplish that. They also, I think they end both with pretty good escape music, since you've just killed somebody. Now it's the runaway part of the song.
Yeah.
Movement 3, in which our... No, that's not how movements are titled, whatever. In which our heroes run away, but... so there's those. Man, there's a really good song tied to a really good scene that I can't talk about very much, but I'll call... The song is Men Have Become Monsters, and it plays during a very powerful scene very late in the game, I think. And I'll just say, like, one character has very obvious cold fury, and it really manages to get that across, I think.
Okay.
While being... again, a lot of the music in this is quiet, but it gets into this rough dissonance, like, dissonance basically being like those harmonies you hear that are just they're not right. They're kind of painful. You don't really want to listen to them. You want them to sound good, but they're like purposely there to make you feel uneasy.
Yeah.
And that really works because you have this very collected person holding back this very powerful anger.
Yeah. And at the same time, that's what makes the song interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Man, there's a couple songs that have specifically to do with Sequence 8 that are awesome that I can't talk about because Sequence 8 is awesome and I don't want to spoil it for you.
You're being too kind.
Man. Are you saying I shouldn't be? Should I just?
Maybe I should take that back.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Let's see. I think we can hit one more, and I'll just say, song that plays during the final confrontation without spoiling what the final confrontation is or whatever. It's called "I Would Have Created a Paradise." It's probably my favorite piece of energetic music in the game. It's got this
the
motive.
piano's great.
Yeah, the piano, right? Starts with these trumpets. And the trumpets come back a bunch. The trumpets, I feel, are associated with 2 or 3 characters who, again, I can't name. But this song is really cool because it's really cool. I like that it can sell this urgency and franticness of this confrontation without being this huge, big orchestra. And I think it really sells, like, because the motive of the piece is da 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 da. You hear the piano right in the beginning. I just sang it very badly because I'm listening to a different part at the same time I'm trying to sing that part.
It's the worst feeling.
Yeah, but the motive is traded through the various instruments as the piece goes on. You start with piano, and by the end you're down in like the cello or the bass. So it's like it feels heavier and more intense, I think, as it goes. As it continues.
And the swapping off of the instruments within the context of the actual scene.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you who've played it, makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, brilliant.
And then it ends with this soft piano, which I think is really nice because that's the end of the journey, the end of the game, except for a few cutscenes. But you win. And here's the denouement, as you might call it, I guess. Mm-hmm. So that was a quick run through of all the story stuff. Unless you guys have more to talk about, All right. So got another category, which I've labeled mission/action music. Basically, it's the energetic music that I'm not bothered to find out exactly when it plays. It shows up when you're fighting people, or maybe when you're stealth, or maybe when you're chasing things. I think there's one that shows up during races. So that's all the songs that have something musical in their names, plus top hats and sword canes, which I don't know why it's not following that theme, but basically, it's the stuff you hear while you're doing things.
Right.
Stealth or knocking people's heads off. Not that you can physically knock people's heads off, but you'd be surprised that they don't come off sometimes. So yeah, do you guys have any particular thoughts about that? This category?
I think it's appropriate, and it's not like over the top,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't make me feel like I'm in some kind of crazy blockbuster movie doing all these like crazy Matrix moves. It just makes me feel like I'm in a really heated moment, and it feels really appropriate.
Yeah, they really sell it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. I might, if there's a comparison to be made to Sherlock Holmes' soundtrack, I would put it here.
Yeah,
I think
like the one with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, or even, both of them, honestly.
Yeah.
Because combat in these, it's not like Sherlock Holmes isn't constantly going up against odds with the universe at stake or whatever.
Yeah.
Every fight he gets in is with a couple people, hand to hand, close quarters.
He could actually die.
Yeah.
Now I want to see Benedict Cumberbatch fight someone in one of the Sherlocks. Maybe we'll do that in the Christmas special. Oh, that'd be dope.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things about these, because I do think they sell that close combat feeling for the ones that are combat. They sell the sneaking around with intent, because that's one of the things about Assassin's Creed is you're always sneaking around, but you're always sneaking around with intent to murder people on your way. Yeah. Right? It's kind of like the Batman games label their stealth sections as Predator, and I think that's a good way to think about it, because a Predator is stealthy but doesn't kill just whatever, and it's not just sneaking around for no reason. It's got a purpose.
Right. It's got a certain mission, exactly.
Yeah. And I think these are for that. There's some of them that feel like just the technique used with the instruments is because I'm in a music school at the moment, and everybody here is obsessed with having this pure tone, this beautiful, technically amazing tone, and I think they purposefully in these couple songs go slightly off of that, so they feel slightly dirty.
Yeah,
it's good because you're fighting people.
The trumpets do that a lot in some of the songs, and when I listen to it, I'm like, this sounds off. It sounds wrong. Well, beating someone up in the middle of the street is off and wrong. So again, the theme of this soundtrack is that it parallels the game probably better than any other soundtrack in AC.
Yeah, and again,
it fits.
Yeah, and again, you're fighting in the street, so it's like, it's the because you're fighting in like the poor districts, the dirty places, for the most part. I don't know. There's not. I mean, Westminster is the toughest area for gangs technically, but I don't think it's as easy to get into gang conflict there as it is in a lot of the other districts.
It's mostly policemen there.
Yeah.
And you probably have the notoriety
that's true.
unlocked by then, so people are like, oh, it's Fried, don't mess with him.
Yeah, but I think, this is music for fighting people in back alleys, out of the light a little bit, away from the gold-lidded eyes of Parliament or the nobility. And I guess that's my 2 cents on these.
Your 2 pennies?
My 2 pennies.
His 2 pence.
He was making a joke about a character, but
you'll get to it.
No spoilers. I mean, his name comes up in one of the titles of the murder ballads.
Again, the murder ballads on the soundtrack are pretty damning.
Yeah, there's 2 that are like, this person dies, this person dies.
Yeah.
Welp.
Yeah. One of them is more of a spoiler than the other. But I don't know. I'll not talk about.
Yeah, we'll skip over those in the next section.
Yeah, maybe we want to come back to these at some other point. Further down the line. But I think I'll just touch a little bit on some of them, some of what's in them. There's one, you've just killed a business person, and the song opens with an apology to their clients, essentially, for being dead.
Sorry, you're dead.
Yeah, so I think all these have a really good way of feeling like, they're murder ballads. You're the murderer, but it's about the person who died.
Yeah.
So they all do a good job of relating to that person. There's a person who is all into the finances, and his has a line like, we all go down with this person. Basically the funds of the nation rest on his shoulders, and bad stuff happens when he dies. And it's interesting because there's the versions that you can hear in the game, because you can go into the pubs and listen to these songs. The versions on the actual soundtrack are much better done. I believe the ones on the actual soundtrack are the ones done by Tripod Actual.
Okay.
And they're, professionally recorded, whereas I guess the ones in the game are more like, these are more like what you'd hear in a bar at the time, because you're not going to have professional recording equipment and like amazingly trained singers in every bar.
Yeah.
Also, same thing with AC4 and the Shanties. The ones on the soundtrack sound distinctly different from the ones in the game, because they got all the actors, all the singers, properly warmed up and all that stuff before they did it. Whereas for the actual game, they put in bad singers and drunks to make it sound more real. So same thing here.
I don't think they actually put in drunks.
I definitely recall reading that somewhere.
Everyone gets
Just
smashed. We're gonna sing some songs.
Here's the thing. I think if you picked up a homeless person off the street, you can't have a guarantee that they're going to even be able to read the words.
Well, or at least they got some of the actual singers a little bit drunk before they had them record.
Here.
They did
Mr.
just get
McDevitt.
random drunks.
Here, Mr. McDevitt, drink this entire pitcher of vodka.
Now sing me a tune. Oh,
Bridgetown.
So, this one is cool because the reason I'm talking about the differences between the soundtrack and the one in the game is I noticed the one in the game leaves out the very last line of the one on the soundtrack. And the very last line on the soundtrack basically breaks free of the civility, I guess, that you might have in normal company. And the last line is literally just, suck on it! God damn it, pretty much. Like, they say suck on it. He says, suck on it all, Mr. Blank. And I just think that's really interesting that that's in the soundtrack. Because I think it really lends to a certain part in the game where people are really frustrated with who this guy was and what he was doing.
yeah, suck on it.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't have much to say on one of them, although I will say, this one, you've killed, like, probably the most noble, like, most outright member of the nobility at this point. And the song, I feel like, actually avoids talking about him that much, except that it starts with images of a fox hunt, kind of, because it says, release the hounds, the chase is underway, hear the bugle call. So it's this fox hunt imagery, and then it goes on, like, this assassin will serve you up on a silver platter after you greet him in your salon.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, this song is all about the trappings of nobility being soured or turned against them or not protecting them. I think that's a really cool way to do it. These words, the lyrics to all these are really good, I think.
Yeah, great lyricism.
Yeah, you could probably write a paper just on these, just like themes with them. I mean, that would probably fall into like more literature and like art. Well, I'm a musicologist. I could do that. But
you should show this podcast to your professor and get extra credit for it.
Maybe I should show him my outline of this thing, like just with all the stuff I mentioned in my notes. Okay, last one, and I'm going to mention it. It's called. I'm going to mention the title. I'm not going to mention who is dead, but it's called "Jokes, Jokes, Jokes." And what I like about it is it's probably the liveliest of them. And it's all about. Sorry, I just got distracted by Ares writing in the dock.
I realized I need to build my notes corner for the next part that I never did.
Oops. But this one, I mean, if you listen to it, it mentions him by name, so that's whatever. But it's cool because this character's like a performer, and it's the most like an entertaining song. Like it's in triple time and a lot less fixed than a lot of the songs in these. And it's just a lot of fun. It's kind of morbid humor as well.
Yeah.
Let's see. The coolest thing about it is it's called Jokes, Jokes, Jokes. There's a line, "You'll never see the ending coming," comes up a bunch. And this is another part where the game does something different. The game ends the song. It's like it resolves really nicely. The actual song ends on. I'm going to go into musician lingo here a little bit. It ends on it essentially ends on a key change. It's it's the lines are you'll never see the ending coming, and then it ends. While it's doing that, it's building you up to expect more of the song. When you have a key change, it's like the last verse, but there's still more of the song. It's building you up to expect more, and then it just ends. So you won't see the ending coming unless you're hearing me talk about it before you listen to it. In which case, I've just told you what it is.
And now I know.
Yeah, but I really like that. I think that's a really... It's probably the cleverest song, I think, as far as the words and the way it's constructed. So that's the last of the straight-up murder ballads. Greg, Aries, do you still want some time to put your notes up?
No, I can do it. Let's go. All right.
Well, so, first off, I would just
actually... talk about Necropolis. Yeah, do that.
Yeah, so I've been reading a book called Necropolis, which is all about London and it's dead. That's literally the subtitle is London and it's dead.
Wow.
And it starts with the plague, because the plague killed a bunch of people. So many people are dead.
Very true.
To the point where... So there's a couple of things, like churchyards fill up. Nobody can be buried in churchyards anymore. Essentially, like, they rotate. They even rotate out the old bones, put in new people, and those are. But at a certain point, you don't want to move the fresh people. You don't want to throw them out with the plague. So that eventually, the graveyards and churches are filled up. People are now worried about getting to heaven because that's how you get to heaven. You're buried on church ground, that's how you have an afterlife at all. It's buried on church ground. But so the graveyards and the churches are filled up. They still have to bury all these dead people. So there's a bunch of mass graves. London was a lot smaller then. So on the outskirts of the city then, they built all these mass graves, just throwing in everybody. Like masses and masses of people, several thousand people at once. But by the time you get to Victorian era, the outskirts of the city are no longer the outskirts of the city. They are in the middle of the city. And it's the point where they start building the subway, the tube, as it's known in London at this time.
Yeah.
And they have to divert course because they cannot physically build through these massive piles of bones.
Wow.
Every construction project in London, you start hearing things about like that. Like whenever you hear like, oh, King Richard III's bones found in a parking lot, it's because they tried to build something, they dug a little, and there's bones right there. And there's a line. There's a line about that in this song. It's the dead are like only an inch below, and that's really true in London. It's always had. It's probably why it's one of the most popular places for Gothic horror. Because it's always had this. It's just always had this massive dead population. Even though I don't know, population might not be the right word. It's dead.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just looked at that and I was like, book. I read yes. So that's my 2 cents on that one line. And there's lots more lines about dead people.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
I'm going to talk about all those now.
All
so
right.
Underground is maybe, I talked about this last week, the way it's used in the ending of the game is brilliant. Go watch last week's episode for that. But to talk about specifically building off of McCrackenway's points about Underground. So I'm going to go through the lyrics and try to avoid what spoilers there are. So opens with, take a look round lively old London, buzzing crowds, we sweat and we revel, red-cheeked shouts and songs in the flicker of the gaslight. So it opens on imagery of London, specifically a festive London, not all of the dark and depressing stuff we've seen at the moment. and we'll get to that. We've seen a moment ago, and we'll get to that later. So it starts positive, and then next thing is eager, blighty bursts from the cobblestones, blighty being an affectionate term for British people, but also in this case, assassin. Racing, climbing, blooming, fertility. Not entirely sure what the whole fertility thing means, but whatever. Maybe like bringing a new world and that kind of fertility, but not entirely sure. Born from secret seeds that were scattered in the nighttime, assassin origin stories and whatnot like that. Next, London is fed upon the meat of the dead. They're one shallow inch below the town. Basically saying, the working poor are so oppressed and downtrodden that all of the positive gains that have come to London, sort of like we mentioned with Marx and Smith earlier, all of this new found technology and industrialization was built upon the backs of the working poor and essentially upon, the corpses of the working poor, basically, because it was their labor and their effort, their blood, sweat, tears, and their own lives that is what at the time modern industrial London needed to survive. So next line after one shallow inch below the town, underground, leave them underground. That's talking specifically about the working poor are all dead, essentially. Mm-hmm. So next is a series of lines about the Templars specifically. So I won't spoil the ones that we haven't talked about yet, but them that whispered dreams that only poisoned us, that would be references to soothing syrup and Elliotson. Them that told us lies of their bravery, not entirely sure about that one. Them that preached of progress.
Go with the crowd of their humility one.
I was thinking that, but I think it may have something to do with Miss Thorne, maybe, but I'm not entirely sure. Them that preached of progress and put us in the poorhouse, that would be the main baddie, Starrick.
Also probably Rupert Ferris.
Maybe, yeah.
They're just like industrialists, I think.
I think
could
given
be argued
a lot
that
of
way, but maybe also not.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be, and I'll get to this later, but a lot of the theme is that it's specific people, but also everybody that's being referenced in these scenes. So them done horrid murder on bloody stages is the same person as the subject of jokes. So for those of you who know who that is, that's that. Specifically, that event occurs in the game. Them that told us lives of their bravery, that would be the noble person we alluded to earlier. Lords and dames that sung in the chapels on a Sunday, not entirely sure about who those are. All quiet now, their mouths are stopped up by mud, they lie flung in rags and make no sound. So I would say that is a reference to the Templars being dead in this case. So then underground, leave them underground so we have the working poor are all dead and the Templars are all dead. So then, last act, we have those who fought for something better, those who taught by how they lived, loved ones taken long before their work was done. That last line specifically we referenced last week as well. And then, again, underground, leave them underground. So now we have assassins are all going to die at some point too. So we have this whole thing of working poor are dead, Templars are dead, assassins are dead, everyone's going to die. So the them is intentionally left vague all throughout the song, but in the end, them is everyone. So everyone dies no matter what, and at first it's this one guy singing, and by the end of the song we have a choral build, so it's a bunch of people joining in at the end. So again, there's this whole theme of it's a group thing that we're all marching towards death. So I think this is probably one of the, talking about lyricism, the most well-written songs that just in general I've heard in terms of how complex and intelligent the lyricism is in this. It sounds fantastic. I've been singing it for weeks. I'll be singing it for months on end after this. But there's so much going on in the song, and with the intended vague aspects of how the lyrics are written, it gets to so many great points, and it really is a microcosm for the entire story of Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Is we can do all we want, but in the end, we're all going to be underground.
Very true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's
that.
Man, this is a cherry podcast.
That was the entire soundtrack.
Yes.
Explained. I mean,
so sad.
Yeah.
But so good.
Yeah, maybe in the future, I think I'll want to revisit some of the action music, because I feel like there's probably some point to be made about, because they all reference music, a type of music. There's probably a musically theoretical connection between the title and the actual content of the piece. Like, I bet the scherzo is actually a scherzo, but to talk about that, I first need to look more into what a scherzo is. So not right now, but sometime maybe we'll do that. But yeah, that was the entire episode for the most part. We don't have any other topics.
How you guys liking Syndicate?
Yeah.
Syndicate is
it's amazing. We generally believe it's to be the best one since two.
Since two,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
just with the music and obviously with this episode, the music.
And I actually wanted to ask you guys, because the last time we got direct sequels was with the Ezio trilogy.
Yeah.
And I honestly am not ready to let the Fry twins go. Like, I want them back next year, even though that's probably not going to happen. But
yeah,
well, man, they need a sequel.
I am 100% on board with that.
Same.
I'm starting to see. I don't know. Maybe Connor's fans really felt this as well, but I'm starting to feel like with Evie and Jacob. Like, I look at, there's a bunch of posts on the sub like, where do you want Assassin's Creed to be next, or where we think Assassin's Creed will be next? And I'm like, I do not care about where Assassin's Creed goes. I just want these characters back.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I've also made this point, like, I would like, just a continuity, like, because I feel like at the moment where the modern day is not quite giving me the continuity I want.
Yeah.
So I would like to focus on some characters and have some continuity with some characters. Especially, I think the way this game ends really sets up for continuation with these characters if they want to do it.
Yeah, I certainly hope that they do.
Like, they're still young. This game took place in 1 year as well.
Yeah, seriously.
And there's just a lot of potential. And Evie and Jacob have a long life ahead of them, and I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, what are they, only like 20, 21 years old?
Yeah, they're pretty young.
How long did we follow Ezio for? I mean,
like 100 years.
60s.
Yeah, we followed him for so long. Why can't we do it?
We followed him up, technically from birth to death. If you watch,
how old was he when he died? Like 80-something?
80-something, I think.
Yeah, it's like 86.
And I think he only really died then because he got lung cancer from all the smoke he inhaled in Cappadocia.
Yeah, seriously. Man, I want these guys back so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have I sprouted my theory of the Meiji Restoration on the podcast yet?
Maybe mention it a few times.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you have.
But I think, the whole trilogy thing has been a bit vague with the new gen entries so far. But I think there's so far a theme of revolutions. So we got French Revolution, we've got a political revolution there. We have the whole technological revolution with London, and I feel like the only other type of revolution is a cultural revolution. And if we want to stick in this whole era, but also get the hell out of Europe, because I think we've done enough there, we can go east and look for revolutions over there. And the one that springs to mind is the Meiji Restoration, which was this whole flooding into Japan when they opened up their borders to international trade. Britain would be like, hell yeah, let's go. And the Fries could be like, yeah, cool, let's go, because that could tie into elements of them going eastward, which is some latery stuff in the game. So read Evie's journal if you want to know about that. But
again,
you can continue Jacob and Evie because they're so freaking young. It would make sense the Templars would want to go there too after getting kicked out of London.
And just as like an actor's point of view, like for Paul Roger Amos and Victoria Atkin, they seem like they had a really good time doing this.
Oh yeah.
So why won't I just want them back?
Yeah.
Hopefully, Ubisoft agrees.
Yeah.
My personal, if I have to choose a setting, I would go for British Raj India, just because.
Yes.
And there's a couple seeds in this game where it hints at what some characters might be doing. So I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That would be my hope. But really, I'm cool with anything as long as we keep these characters.
Yeah.
I agree.
The reason I suggested the Meiji Restoration in the first place is because I was thinking, what can we do that continues Jacob and Evie? And that seemed like the most logical thing to me.
There's the Revolution trilogy, maybe, but I would also be satisfied with just being like, oh, Unity, whatever. Let's have a Jacob and Evie trilogy.
Yeah, I'd rather that too.
Yeah, I agree. Because it feels like we have to, not fall in love with characters every year, but it would be nice just to have some connection every year.
Yeah.
Because I miss the Ezio stuff. I miss looking forward to playing as Ezio again.
And I mean, it's possible to make someone connect with the character over the course of one game, but I think it's easier and you can do more over the course of several games.
Yeah, I think Ubisoft would really be letting an opportunity fly by if they don't do more with the Fry twins.
Yeah, and I mean, I talked about this with like Arkham Knight, just because Arkham Knight was the third, they could do some really interesting things with the characters there that, you know, you can make permanent changes to lives that you actually care about, which I think is, because if you change the status quo really early, then you haven't got used to one status quo, so you don't care if it changes.
Yes.
But yeah. All right. We should probably wrap up, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Recording is 1 hour and 20 minutes. So it's good.
Alrighty. So, we are still recording, right? You didn't pause to tell me that.
Yeah, still going.
Okay. So, that was the episode, guys.
Hooray.
Thanks for joining us, Dan and Matt.
No,
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It was fun, as always.
Yes, definitely.
Go check out their channel.
So,
Hey.
Yay.
the music used in this episode should be in the description. I'm not in charge of editing this one this time. So that's on you, Afty. I hope you were planning some editing techniques while we were talking. But, as usual, you can reach all of us on the Assassin's Creed subreddit, assassinscreed.reddit.com, or reddit.com/r/Assassin's Creed, as well as on Twitter. The three of us hosts are, as well as Dan and Matt here. And if you're looking to contact us in private, maybe you want to be a guest, you can go to our email, animusillandpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word, Animus Island Podcast. No funny characters or whatever. Next week, I have no idea who we're joined by, but if you'd like to be a guest and would like to ask us a question, then contact in any of the ways listed, any of the ways that will probably be in the description. Again, thanks to everybody for being on. It was loads of fun. Talking about a load of awesome music. And hope to see you next week, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Take a look around lively old London, buzzing crowds, we sweat and we revel, red-cheeked shouts and songs in the flicker of the gaslight. Eager blighty bursts from the cobblestones, racing, climbing, blooming fertility, born from secret seeds that are scattered in the night time. London is fed upon the meat of the dead. They're one shallow inch below the town. Underground, underground, leave them underground. Them that whispered dreams that only poisoned us, them that told us lies of their bravery, them that preached of progress and put us in the poorhouse, them done horrid murder on bloody stages, them that loudly crowed their humility, lords and dames that sung in the chapels on a Sunday. All quiet now, their mouths are stopped up by mud. They lie flung in rags and make no sound. Underground, underground, leave them underground. Those who fought for something better, those who taught by how they lived, loved ones taken long before their work was done. Underground, underground, leave them underground. Underground, underground, leave them underground. Underground, underground, leave them underground.